The day Mia arrived on Earth was an event etched into the history of the galaxy. She wasn't just any exchange student, she was the first of her kind to walk among humans as part of a fragile cultural alliance. As she stepped off the spacecraft, her presence was magnetic, her form unlike anything the crowd had ever seen, yet eerily familiar. Her blue skin shimmered like the surface of an untouched lake, smooth and flawless under the pale sun. Her eyes, the color of an Earth ocean caught in the moonlight, carried a depth that seemed to pierce through facades. For Darian, a college senior who considered himself unflappable, seeing her for the first time felt like being caught in the gravity of a star. She moved with an elegance that made even Earth's beauty pale in comparison. In the lecture hall, whispers buzzed as Mia took her seat at the front, her posture immaculate and her expression unreadable. Darian couldn't stop watching her. It wasn't just her appearance, it was her air of self-assured mystery, the way she seemed impervious to the stares and whispers of her human peers. When Professor Hayes introduced Mia as their new classmate, the room fell into an uneasy silence. The professor went on about intergalactic diplomacy and cultural exchange, but Darian barely heard a word. His gaze lingered on Mia, who appeared entirely unfazed by the attention. "Is there something on my face?" Her voice, melodic yet firm, jolted him out of his thoughts. Darian blinked, realizing he'd been staring too long. No. Just wasn't expecting an alien in my sociology class, that's all." Her lips curved into a faint smirk, and she leaned slightly closer. "And I wasn't expecting humans to be so easily distracted." The comment stung his pride, but it also intrigued him. He'd met confident women before, but Mia's confidence was different, calculated, almost regal. It was as though she knew exactly how to disarm him with a single glance or word. Their first real interaction came a week later when the professor assigned them to the same cultural integration project. Darian felt his chest tighten when he saw her name beside his on the group list. "Looks like we're stuck together," he said when they met in the library to plan. "Indeed," Mia replied, her tone neutral. "I hope you're competent enough to keep up." Darian raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "Confident, aren't you?" "Confidence is earned," she said simply, her gaze steady. Over the next few weeks, they worked together closely, though it wasn't easy. Mia was meticulous, driven, and unyielding in her standards. Darian, used to taking the lead, found himself challenged in ways he hadn't expected. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, he began to see glimpses of something more. One late evening in the library, as they reviewed their notes, Mia paused, her gaze fixed on the glowing pages of an old Earth book. "Do you ever wonder," she began, her voice softer than usual, "if your world is as beautiful as you think it is, or if you've just grown used to it?" Darian frowned, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know. Maybe both." "Why?" Mia traced the edges of the book with her fingertips, her expression distant. "On my planet, beauty is often calculated, manufactured. Here, it feels unpolished, but genuine. It's different." Her vulnerability in that moment struck him. "You miss home?" he asked gently. Mia hesitated, then shook her head. "Number home isn't always a place you want to return to." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Darian felt a pull toward her, a need to understand the layers beneath her confident exterior. But just as the silence grew too intimate, Mia straightened, her mask of composure snapping back into place. "We should focus on the project," she said, her tone brisk. Darian nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just passed between them. That night, as he lay awake in his dorm room, he found himself replaying their conversations, her words, her expressions. There was something about Mia, something he couldn't quite define but couldn't ignore, and he had the distinct feeling that whatever it was, it would change his life forever. The library was quiet when Darian slid a piece of paper across the table to Mia. She glanced at it with a raised brow, her delicate blue fingers brushing the edge of the page. "What is this?" she asked, her tone curious yet guarded. "It's a list," Darian said, leaning back in his chair with a grin. Mia scanned the items on the paper. "Hot dogs, roller coasters, road trips, skydiving. What are these?" "Experiences," he replied. "You've been here weeks, but you haven't really seen Earth, at least not the way we do. You're always in lectures, meetings, and library sessions. If you're going to be the first alien exchange student, you've got to experience the fun stuff too." Mia tilted her head, considering him. "And you think you're qualified to show me this fun?" Darian smirked. "I don't just think I know." She hesitated for a moment, then folded the paper and slipped it into her bag. "Very well, Darian. Show me your world." Their first stop was a street fair in New Orleans. Mia's eyes widened as they walked through the colorful chaos of the bustling market, jazz music floating in the air. "What is this energy?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe. "Welcome to New Orleans," Darian said, handing her a beignet covered in powdered sugar. "Try this." Mia inspected the pastry skeptically before taking a bite. Her eyes lit up, and for the first time, Darian saw her smile wide and genuine. "It's incredible," she admitted, licking the sugar from her lips. "Earth has its moments," Darian said with a chuckle, watching her take another bite. The next day, they visited the Grand Canyon. As Mia stood at the edge of the vast chasm, the wind tugging at her dark hair, she seemed smaller somehow, humbled by the immensity before her. "This is beyond words," she said softly. "Does your world always feel this vast? Only when you stop and really look at it," Darian replied. Mia turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I see why you find it hard to leave. Your planet is raw, untamed, beautiful." Darian smiled. "Wait till you see the next stop." Their road trip took them through deserts, forests, and bustling cities. Mia experienced everything from the adrenaline of a roller coaster at Coney Island to the serene beauty of Yellowstone's geysers. Along the way, Darian noticed a change in her. The walls she kept so carefully constructed began to crack. She laughed more freely, her curiosity unguarded, as she asked questions about Earth's quirks and traditions. One afternoon, as they drove along the Pacific Coast Highway, Mia leaned her head out the window, her blue skin glistening in the sunlight. The wind whipped through her hair as she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "I think I understand why humans are so passionate," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Yeah?" Darian glanced at her. "Your world is chaotic, loud, imperfect, but it's alive in a way that mine isn't. On my planet, everything is calculated, efficient, predictable. Here, it feels like anything can happen." Darian laughed. "That's one way to put it. Chaos is kind of our thing." Mia smiled, her gaze meeting his. "It's not so bad." Their final stop was New York City. Standing atop the Empire State Building, Mia looked out over the sea of lights stretching endlessly into the horizon. "It's strange," she murmured. "Your people build things so high as if trying to touch the stars, and yet you don't realize how extraordinary the ground beneath you already is." Darian leaned on the railing beside her. "Maybe we're just always reaching for more." She turned to him, her blue eyes searching his. "And you, Darian? What are you reaching for?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know. Something different, I guess. Something that makes life feel bigger." Mia's gaze softened. "You remind me of myself, in a way." "How's that?" "You're restless," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Always searching for what you can't quite name. Always curious." Before he could respond, she reached out, her hand brushing his. Her touch was cool, sending a shiver up his spine. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with uncharacteristic warmth. "For what?" "For showing me your world," she replied, her gaze fixed on his. "For reminding me that life can be more than duty and expectation." In that moment, Darian felt a connection so profound, it made the bustling city below them fade into insignificance. Mia wasn't just an alien exchange student anymore. She was someone who saw the world and him in a way no one else ever had. Their journey was far from over, but as they stood together beneath the stars, Darian knew one thing for certain. They had changed each other, and nothing would ever be the same. The hum of the jet engine was a steady undercurrent as Darian and Mia flew over the jagged peaks of the Rockies. The late afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light, but neither of them seemed interested in the view. "You didn't tell me you were afraid of heights," Darian teased, noting the way Mia's hands gripped the armrests. "I'm not afraid," Mia said tersely, though her knuckles betrayed her. "I am unaccustomed." Darian chuckled. "Relax. Humans do this all the time. Statistically, flying is safer than driving. Statistics do little to comfort when you are hurtling through the air in a tin can." "Fair point." He leaned back, watching her. The past week had been a whirlwind of adventure, and Mia had surprised him at every turn. Her sharp intellect had softened with moments of unexpected humor. Her stoic demeanor cracked to reveal flashes of vulnerability. But this, seeing her flustered, it was a rare delight. "Why do humans enjoy taking unnecessary risks?" she asked, her voice tinged with exasperation. "Because the risk makes it exciting," Darian replied. "You can't truly live if you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone." Mia turned her head to meet his gaze, her expression thoughtful. And what happens when you step too far? The question lingered between them, heavy and unspoken. Darian didn't have an answer, not one he could articulate anyway. Their next stop was Las Vegas, a city of dazzling lights and relentless energy. Mia was fascinated by the spectacle, her eyes wide as they wandered through the labyrinth of casinos and bustling streets. "This is madness," she said, as they passed a street performer breathing fire. "Welcome to Vegas," Darian said with a grin. They found themselves at a blackjack table, where Mia quickly proved her mastery of probability. In less than an hour, she had turned $50 into a small fortune, drawing the attention of both the dealer and the surrounding players. "You're a natural," Darian said, genuinely impressed. Mia smirked, gathering her chips. "On my planet, gambling is considered a frivolous waste of time. And yet, here you are. Perhaps I'm learning the value of frivolity." Later that evening, they wandered down the strip, the neon lights casting strange shadows on Mia's blue skin. "Do you ever feel out of place?" Darian asked as they stopped in front of a massive fountain that erupted in synchronized bursts of water and light. Mia tilted her head, considering the question. "Every moment of every day," she admitted, "even before I came to Earth." "Why?" She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the dancing water. "On my planet, I was raised to be an ambassador, a symbol of unity and strength. But symbols are not allowed to feel, to question, to desire." Her last word hung in the air, and Darian felt his chest tighten. "And now?" he asked quietly. Mia turned to him, her expression open yet guarded. "Now, I am beginning to understand what it means to want something for myself. It is unsettling." Darian took a step closer, their proximity charged. "Sometimes, unsettling is good." She searched his face, her usual confidence wavering. "You speak as if you know what I'm feeling." "Maybe I do." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the chaos of the city around them faded into nothing. But before either of them could move, a loud cheer erupted from a nearby crowd, breaking the spell. Mia stepped back, her composure snapping into place. "We should return to the hotel," she said, her voice cool. Darian watched her retreating form, his pulse racing. He knew he was walking a fine line, one that could not be undone once crossed. The tension between them grew sharper with each passing day. In Yosemite, as they hiked through the towering redwoods, Mia marveled at the sheer scale of Earth's natural wonders. "This planet is so unapologetic," she said, her fingers trailing along the rough bark of a tree. "And you love that about it," Darian said, watching her. Mia smiled faintly. "Perhaps I do." Later, as they sat by a campfire under a canopy of stars, the conversation took a more personal turn. "What's the hardest thing you've ever done?" Darian asked, his voice low. Mia stared into the flames, her expression unreadable. "Leaving behind everything I've ever known to come here, to this strange, unpredictable world. And do you regret it?" She met his gaze, her blue eyes luminous in the firelight. "No," she said softly, "but it has made me question everything I thought I understood about myself." Her words hit Darian like a wave, and he knew he couldn't hold back any longer. "Mia," he began, his voice tinged with urgency. She shook her head, her expression conflicted. "Darian, this is dangerous." "So what?" he said, leaning closer. "You said it yourself. Life is chaotic and imperfect. Maybe that's the point." Mia's breath hitched as his hand brushed hers. For a moment, it seemed as though she might pull away, but then she stilled, her gaze locked on his. "We are from different worlds," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This cannot be." "Why not?" he countered, his voice firm. "Who decides what's possible and what's not?" Their faces were inches apart now, the firelight casting flickering shadows on their skin. "Darian," she began, but her voice faltered. "Yes?" Whatever she was about to say was lost, as the tension between them exploded in a rush of emotion. Mia closed the distance, her lips brushing his in a tentative yet electrifying kiss. It was fleeting, a mere second in the grand scheme of things, but it left them both breathless. As Mia pulled away, her expression was a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "This changes everything," she said. "Good," Darian replied, his voice steady, "because I don't want things to stay the same." The university buzzed with life as the semester hit full swing. Midterms loomed, and the once bubbly chatter of the campus had transformed into hurried whispers and frustrated groans. Darian had always hated this time of year, but now it felt different. There was a weight pressing down on him, heavier than any exam or assignment. It wasn't just the secret he and Mia now shared, it was the growing distance between them. Mia had retreated into herself after that night by the campfire. In class, she was her usual composed, enigmatic self, offering sharp insights that left the professors impressed and the students intimidated. But when their eyes met across the lecture hall, she looked away. "Everything okay with Mia?" Emily, one of Darian's friends, asked during a break between classes. He shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "Why wouldn't it be?" Emily gave him a knowing look. "Come on, Darian. You've been glued to her side for weeks, and now she barely talks to anyone. Did something happen?" Darian hesitated. He trusted Emily, they'd been friends since freshman year, but how could he explain what was going on without revealing too much? "It's complicated," he said finally. "Complicated," she repeated, crossing her arms. "Right. Just don't screw this up, okay? She's got enough on her plate without you making things weird." The comment stung, but Darian knew Emily was right. Mia was already under immense pressure as the first alien exchange student. The last thing she needed was more drama. That afternoon, Darian found Mia sitting alone under a tree on the edge of campus. Her usual confident posture softened as she flipped through a human literature textbook. "Hey," he said, approaching cautiously. Mia looked up, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Darian. Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the space beside her without a word. For a moment, they sat in silence, the sounds of campus life humming around them. "I've been meaning to ask," Darian began, his voice tentative. "How are you holding up with everything, classes, people, the whole Earth thing?" Mia closed her book, her fingers lingering on the pages. "Humans are difficult to understand. Your world is loud, chaotic. Your emotions are so unfiltered. It's overwhelming at times." Darian leaned back, watching her. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. You've got friends here." "Friends," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Do humans often call someone a friend without understanding them?" "What do you mean?" She turned to him, her blue eyes piercing. "Friendship, as I understand it, requires a bond of trust and mutual understanding. Do you trust me, Darian?" The question caught him off guard, but he answered without hesitation. "Yeah, I do. And yet you are afraid," she said, her gaze steady. "Afraid of what?" "Of what this connection between us means," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "For you, for me, for everyone watching." Darian exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, maybe I am, but that doesn't mean I want to give up on it." Mia's expression softened, and for the first time in days, she smiled, a small, fleeting gesture, but genuine. Over the next few weeks, their friendship began to rebuild. Though it was anything but simple, they fell into a rhythm, balancing their growing connection with the demands of university life. Late-night study sessions became a regular occurrence, though they often devolved into debates about Earth culture versus Mia's homeworld. Mia was fascinated by human art and music, but she struggled to grasp Earth's obsession with sports. "I fail to see the appeal of watching people chase a ball for hours," she said one evening, her tone incredulous. "It's not about the ball," Darian argued, laughing. "It's about the passion, the teamwork, the competition." Mia raised an eyebrow. "And yet, your species seems to have difficulty applying these principles outside of games." Darian groaned. "You're impossible. And you're predictable," she shot back, though her smirk betrayed her amusement. Their dynamic didn't go unnoticed by their classmates. Whispers followed them everywhere: curiosity, suspicion, and, in some cases, outright hostility. One afternoon, as they worked on a group project in the library, a student named Jake made his disdain clear. "Don't you think it's weird?" he said loudly, addressing no one in particular. "An alien walking around pretending to be one of us?" Darian's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Mia spoke. "Pretending implies deception," she said calmly, not looking up from her notes. "I am here to learn, just as you are." Jake sneered. "Yeah, well, maybe you should stick to learning on your own planet." The tension in the room was palpable, and Darian felt his fists clench. "Back off, Jake," he said, his voice low but firm. Jake scoffed. "What's your deal, man? Why are you defending her?" "Because she's not just an alien," Darian snapped. "She's my friend. And if you can't deal with that, it's your problem." The room fell silent, Jake's face reddening as he muttered something under his breath and walked away. Mia watched him go, her expression unreadable. You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," Darian replied. "You deserve better." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you." That night, as they walked across the quiet campus, Mia turned to him. "You said I have friends here," she began, "but I think Perhaps you are the only one who truly means it. Darian stopped, his gaze serious. Then I'll just have to make sure I'm a good one. Mia smiled, her walls lowering once again. You already are. They walked on, their bond stronger than ever. And though they knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, they also knew they wouldn't face them alone. The weeks after the confrontation with Jake were both a blessing and a curse. While Darian and Mia grew closer, the whispers around campus grew louder. Students stared openly when they walked through the quad together, and social media buzzed with photos and memes of the alien and her human. Some found it amusing, others intriguing, but a vocal few saw their friendship as a threat to human identity. Mia tried to ignore it. She buried herself in her studies, excelling in ways that impressed even the most skeptical professors. But Darian could see the toll it was taking on her. The confident, composed girl who had once walked into the lecture hall with unshakable grace now hesitated before entering crowded spaces. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee at a campus cafe, Darian overheard two students whispering at a nearby table. "Did you see the post? Some guy said she's probably spying for her people," one of them said, glancing in Mia's direction. The other laughed nervously. "Yeah, or maybe she's planning to steal all our secrets. I mean, why else would an alien come here?" Darian slammed his coffee cup onto the counter, drawing startled looks from both students. "She's here because she's smarter than you," he snapped. "Maybe spend less time spreading crap online and more time studying." The two students muttered something unintelligible and quickly left. Darian grabbed the drinks and returned to the table where Mia sat, staring at her reflection in the window. "You didn't have to do that," she said without looking at him. "Yes, I did," he replied, sliding her drink across the table. "People need to understand you're not the enemy." Mia sighed, her shoulders slumping. "And yet, no matter what I do, I will always be seen as other." Darian leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Not by me, not by the people who actually know you." She looked at him then, her blue eyes shimmering with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. But is that enough? Things came to a head during a campus debate on intergalactic diplomacy. Mia had been invited to speak as part of a panel, but the event quickly devolved into chaos. A group of students protesting alien integration disrupted the discussion, shouting slogans and holding signs with phrases like "Earth for humans" and "Aliens go home." Darian watched from the audience, his blood boiling as the protesters' chants drowned out Mia's measured responses. She tried to maintain her composure, but he could see the cracks forming. Finally, she stood, her voice cutting through the noise. "I came here to learn, to understand, and to build a bridge between our worlds. But it seems some of you would rather destroy that bridge out of fear." The room fell silent, her words striking a nerve. But before she could continue, a protester shouted, "Go back to your own planet!" Darian was on his feet before he realized it. "That's enough," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "You talk about fear, but the only thing to be afraid of is your own ignorance." Security quickly intervened, escorting the most disruptive protesters out of the room. The panel resumed, but the damage had been done. Mia's expression was a mask of stoicism, but Darian knew the hurt ran deep. Later that night, Darian found Mia sitting on a bench near the campus fountain, her usual air of confidence replaced by quiet vulnerability. "I shouldn't have come here," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the rippling water. "No matter what I do, I'll always be a target." Darian sat beside her, unsure of what to say. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the day pressing down on them. "You're wrong," he said finally, his voice firm. "You've done more than you realize. Yeah, some people are jerks, but others are starting to see the truth because of you. Don't let the loudest voices drown out the ones that matter." Mia turned to him, her blue eyes filled with a mix of doubt and hope. "And what about us, Darian? This connection we share. Does it matter?" He reached for her hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "It matters more than anything." For the first time that day, Mia smiled, a small, fragile thing, but real. "Then perhaps this is worth fighting for." "It is," Darian said, his voice unwavering, "and we'll fight for it together." As they sat under the stars, their bond stronger than ever, they both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew they had found something worth risking everything for. The evening was quiet, the campus cloaked in a soft mist that blurred the edges of reality. Mia stood by the edge of the university pond, the glow of the distant lampposts reflecting on the water. Darian approached her slowly, his footsteps soft on the damp grass. "You're brooding again," he said lightly, hoping to draw her out of her thoughts. Mia turned, her expression unreadable. "Your world has a way of doing that to me," she said, her voice tinged with melancholy. Darian frowned, stepping closer. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, her blue eyes shimmering with emotions she rarely let him see. "Sometimes I wonder if this was a mistake," she admitted. "Not just coming here, but letting myself care." Darian's chest tightened. "Mia, you don't understand," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "On my planet, connections like this, feelings like this, they're considered distractions, weaknesses. I was trained to suppress them, to focus on duty above all else. But now," she trailed off, her gaze dropping to the ground. "But now, you're here," Darian said, his voice soft yet steady. "And you're not just some ambassador or symbol. You're you, and that matters." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for something reassurance, perhaps, or permission to feel the things she'd been taught to deny. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I know what it's like to feel lost," he said, stepping closer. "To wonder if you're enough, or if you're doing the right thing. But I also know what it's like to find something, or someone that makes everything else make sense." The space between them seemed to shrink, the air charged with an unspoken tension. Mia's breath hitched as Darian reached out, his hand brushing her cheek. Her skin was cool to the touch, like the surface of a calm sea, but it sent a warmth through him that was impossible to ignore. "You make sense to me, Mia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For a moment, the weight of their worlds, the expectations, the prejudices, the risks, faded into the background. There was only the two of them, standing on the precipice of something extraordinary. "Darian," she began, her voice trembling. He didn't let her finish. Instead, he leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was both tender and electric. For a heartbeat, she stiffened, as if resisting the very thing she'd spent weeks denying. But then she melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as she surrendered to the moment. The kiss deepened, their connection igniting like a firestorm. It wasn't just passion. It was a meeting of two souls who had been searching for something more, something that defied logic and reason. In that instant, it didn't matter that they were from different worlds. What mattered was the undeniable truth between them. When they finally pulled apart, Mia's eyes were wide, her breathing uneven. This is dangerous," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," Darian admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "But some things are worth the risk." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze softening. "You truly believe that, don't you?" "I do," he said without hesitation. "And I think you do too." Mia's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. "Perhaps I'm learning to." They stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, the world around them forgotten. When the chill of the evening finally reminded them of reality, they walked back to the dorms together, their hands intertwined. For the first time since she'd arrived on Earth, Mia felt at peace, not because she'd found answers, but because she'd found someone willing to stand by her side, no matter the cost. And Darian? He knew that their love wouldn't be easy, but as he glanced at Mia, her blue skin glowing softly in the moonlight, he also knew it would be worth every challenge they would face. The final days of the semester arrived with a mix of excitement and tension. The campus was alive with the hum of exams, goodbyes, and plans for the future. For Darian and Mia, however, the end of the semester marked an even more profound shift. Their time together, as they knew it, was running out. Mia had been summoned to a formal intergalactic council meeting, a decision that would determine the continuation of the cultural exchange program. It wasn't just her future at stake, but the fragile bridge between their worlds. The council wanted to assess the success of her time on Earth and decide if such exchanges should continue. "They'll want evidence," she explained to Darian, as they sat on the campus lawn under the sprawling oak tree where they'd shared so many conversations. "Proof that this experiment was worth the risk." Darian frowned, his jaw tightening. "And what happens if they decide it wasn't?" Mia looked away, her expression distant. "I'll be sent back to my planet. Permanently." The thought hit Darian like a punch to the gut. He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Then we'll give them proof. You've made connections here, Mia. You've changed minds, mine included. That has to count for something." She smiled faintly, her eyes glimmering with gratitude. "You always believe in the impossible, don't you?" "Only because you've shown me it's possible," he said softly. The day of the council meeting arrived faster than either of them expected. A massive holographic interface was set up in the university's auditorium, connecting Earth to the council chambers on Mia's homeworld. The room was packed with students, professors, and officials, all watching intently as Mia stood before the projection of the alien council. The council members were imposing figures, their holographic forms towering over Mia. Their questions were direct and unyielding, probing her experiences, challenges, and the value of her time on Earth. At first, Mia's responses were measured and diplomatic. She spoke of Earth's complexities, its strengths and flaws, and the potential for growth between their species. But when one council member questioned whether humanity was truly worth the effort, Mia's composure cracked. "With respect," she said, her voice steady but impassioned, "the value of this program cannot be measured in simple terms. My time here has shown me the depths of human resilience, creativity, and emotion. These are not weaknesses, they are strengths. And they are why I believe this alliance must continue." The council murmured among themselves, their holographic faces inscrutable. "Have you formed significant bonds during your time on Earth?" another member asked. "Connections that justify the risks you've taken?" Mia hesitated, her gaze shifting to Darian, who stood in the audience. For a moment, she seemed to struggle with the weight of her words. Then, with quiet conviction, she replied, "Yes, I have." When the meeting ended, Mia walked out of the auditorium, her expression unreadable. Darian followed her, his heart pounding. "What did they say?" he asked as they stopped under the oak tree. "They'll deliberate," she said, her voice heavy. "But the decision could take weeks, maybe months." Darian's shoulders sagged. "So, what happens now?" Mia turned to him, her blue eyes soft, but filled with resolve. "I return home for now. But if the program continues, I'll have a chance to come back. And if it doesn't?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then reached for his hand, her touch cool yet grounding. "Then we'll find another way. No council can dictate what we mean to each other." Darian pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her as if letting go would shatter him. "I'm not losing you, Mia. Not now. Not ever." She leaned into him, her voice a whisper against his ear. "You won't. No matter where I am, you're part of me now." The day of Mia's departure arrived with a bittersweet clarity. The university gathered to bid her farewell, the once skeptical students now offering heartfelt goodbyes and well wishes. Darian stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart heavy, as he watched her prepare to board the shuttle that would take her to the stars. Before stepping aboard, Mia turned and walked to him, her expression calm but her eyes glistening. "This isn't goodbye," she said softly. "No," Darian agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "It's just the beginning." She smiled, the kind of smile that carried 1,000 unspoken promises. Then, before the crowd, she leaned in and kissed him a kiss that was tender, yet filled with the fire of everything they'd shared. When they pulled apart, Mia whispered, "Until we meet again." Darian nodded, his throat tight. "Until then." As the shuttle ascended into the sky, a brilliant streak of light against the horizon, Darian stood watching until it disappeared. The world felt quieter, emptier, without her beside him, but he knew their story wasn't over. In the days that followed, Darian poured himself into learning everything he could about intergalactic relations, determined to play a role in bridging the gap between their worlds. And as he looked up at the stars each night, he felt a quiet certainty. No matter how vast the distance, love could cross even the greatest divides, because some connections are written in the very fabric of the universe, destined to endure beyond time, beyond worlds.